All right, we're going to try to get this started. Thank you. On behalf of the Town Council, I want to welcome everybody today. This is our first in a series of mayor forums. I have a little bit of an introduction to kind of set the agenda. Then I'm going to introduce, have each of the panelists kind of tell us a little bit about themselves and about what they're doing. And then we have like some panel discussions where we're going to ask questions of them. And everybody got a form on your way in. If you have any questions, when you have any questions, if you can bring those over to my left, where the deputy mayor is and the clerk of the council will be there. And during this discussion, we'll put in some of those questions, and then at the end, again, we'll open it up again. All right. So again, I really want to thank everybody for coming. Clearly, thank everybody on the panel. So kind of, why are we here today? The purpose is South Windsor's position to grow, but competition for the new business and investment is stronger than ever. This Mayor's Forum brings together regional, municipal, and private sector leaders to explore how South Windsor can remain competitive by using smart, targeted economic development tools, including performance-based tax abatements. The discussion will focus on attracting new employers, new businesses, encouraging reinvestment, and expanding the commercial tax base while maintaining fiscal responsibility. So why should anybody want to move to South Windsor? We're going to hear from the experts in a minute. But over time, because of the efforts of many people, some of whom are here tonight, South Windsor has positioned itself as a business-friendly town, blending strong economic assets, strategic location, quality of life, and local support for business growth. We have a strategic location. We have the proximity to Hartford. We're located between Boston and New York City. We have a high quality of life, a high quality school system, a strong workforce, and an important balance between services that some area towns do not provide while trying to keep our town as affordable as possible. So what kind of land are we talking about tonight, or what kind of projects? I think some people in town think that a lot of the development going on in our town is the town doing it. But what happens and what we're talking about tonight are projects that happen when the owner of our property in town that are zoned for business or multiple unit housing contract to have their land developed. Please note that legislation could change and complicate this process in the future. We're talking about balance tonight. And that's, South Windsor's a medium-sized town that continues to cherish its farming roots and believes in the important balance between land preservation and development. As an example, I'm not sure if everybody knows, but approximately 14% of all the land in town is now preserved as open space. The reason we're here tonight primarily is because, like other towns, we're facing a number of challenges, and we're hoping that we can all learn from some of the experts. We've experienced a slowdown in the growth of our grand list. We have the fastest growing school district over the past 10 years in the state. And like other towns, we're dealing with large increases in the cost of mandatory purchases, like employee health care. This is simple math. Decreasing revenues and increasing expenditures can quickly lead to rising and unsustainable tax increases. While the state views us as an affluent town, we clearly have many families here that are having financial difficulty or challenges. Done correctly, adding new business, adding new housing to our town can mean more amenities, more jobs, more tax revenue, and lower overall tax rates. To be more specific, one or more new business projects that we can bring in that might bring in, let's say, $1.35 million a year in building fees and taxes would allow us to reduce the otherwise necessary tax increase by 1%. And I guess from my viewpoint, kind of the overall themes is trying to balance short-term incentives with long-term fiscal sustainability, leveraging regional partnerships, you're going to hear about that today, for high-quality employers, and aligning our economic development with South Windsor's community values. At this time, I want to welcome our town manager, Michael Maniscalco, for some introductory words.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me go around and I'll just say thank you to all the audience that came here today, as well as all the panelists. It's really a pleasure to see everybody and very happy to have everybody here. You know, the mayor did a great job at kind of outlining the big picture, but in the simplest of terms, South Windsor is at a point where times are changing. We've gone from a time when there was tons of open space and land available for development. We're now starting to see a shift in our economic development activities, and we're trying to move more towards a redevelopment scenario where, you know, the lifespan of buildings has come to an end and we're trying to redevelop them and move them into new things. Additionally, we're also trying to take actions to preserve our character of our community, to make sure that the different open spaces and things are preserved for long term for everyone to enjoy. So it's very much a challenging balancing act in making all that happen, but at the end of the day, we're here to talk about economic development. And in terms of economic development and looking at the town of South Windsor, from business owners and developers and people I've had the conversations with, people say to me all the time, it's a joy to work with the town of South Windsor. And in comparison to other places, Hartford, West Hartford, East Hartford, South Windsor is the place to go if you want to get business done quick, you want to get it done easy, and you want to make things happen. So I'm very pleased that's people's takeaway, and I hope that people get that on a regular basis. I've worked time and time again with our staff to make sure that that is, you know, the hope as people move forward. And I'm very pleased that tonight we get to have a conversation about that and celebrate the good things that we do in South Windsor and talk about the things that we could do in the future. So from that, I say thank you to everybody that came tonight and really appreciate everybody, and I'll turn it back over to the mayor.
Yep. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. So tonight's discussion again is going to be led by an experienced panel. You know, to my right and left, these are people with a lot of years of experience representing development, philanthropy, regional planning, and municipal leadership. But before I introduce them, I just would like to acknowledge some of the people in the audience. But for brevity, you know, in the front row we have Senator Anwar, and I'm probably at some point we'll probably have our state reps here. Will all the members of the town council maybe just stand up so everybody can see you, and thank you for coming. And we have a former mayor who's sitting down because she just got injured, Audrey Denlicky. Members of the Board of Ed that are here, could you guys do the same, just so we know that you're here? Thank you for coming. The people that from planning and zoning, and before I started running for the town council, I didn't realize just how important the next two groups of people are. But for the people here from planning and zoning, if people would stand up. And then we have representatives from EDC that are here. Thank you, great turnout. And then I'm really excited by the fact that we have a whole bunch of members of the public here today, and I think that's extremely important. I will put in a quick little pitch that we've started the budget process. It would be great to have an audience like this as we start discussing the budget in depth. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn to my left to Mr. Maniscalco, to Mike, and have him just again introduce himself, tell us a little about him and what he does, and then we'll go to the left, and then we'll go to the right.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I've been town manager for the town of South Windsor for almost 7 years, and did 7 years in the town of East Hampton as the town manager there. Prior to that, as some people may know or may not know, I worked as the executive director of economic development for Logan County, Illinois, which is a small rural county. During my tenure there, we actually pulled off one of the largest wind farms in the state of Illinois through zoning regulation changes, as well as other regulation changes to make that happen. It resulted in over $1 billion economic impact to the county itself, keeping rural schools open for residents in that community. I've had the opportunity to work on a number of other economic development projects, both here in South Windsor as well as in East Hampton and across the board, but we could talk about those sorts of things some other time. I'm very pleased to be here. Originally a Connecticut native, born and raised, and kind of did the long way back to South Windsor, so I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
All right, we have, and I apologize, it's Aaron Smith, Director of Business Development, Advanced CT.
Good evening, everyone. Aaron Smith. Thank you for hosting this, Mr. Mayor. I work for Advanced CT, which is an economic development organization that focuses on the business attraction and retention for companies in the state of Connecticut. My focus is on the location advisory space, hosting a number of different site selection consultants and those that advise companies on where to site their next venture and grow their businesses. Thank you.
Okay, we have David Griggs, President and CEO of Metro Hartford Alliance.
Yep. Good evening, and thank you for inviting us out. So David Griggs, Metro Hartford Alliance, we are a combination of a regional economic development group and the Hartford Chamber of Commerce. We recently relaunched the Hartford Chamber of Commerce and have had programs like HeartLift and now the Arena District Funding Initiative that is bringing new life to our struggling retail sector in Hartford. We're about halfway through Pratt Street right now. We hope that by next season, when you go see the Championship Huskies, that you're going to come to an arena that has a vibrant front for you. And we think that having that heart of our region alive and vibrant is as important to Hartford as it is for South Windsor. So very happy to be here. Like Aaron, we do a bit of globe trotting to make sure that Hartford stays, and by Hartford I mean all of us, Hartford region stays in front of site selectors and decision makers around the world that are making decisions on where businesses can locate.
All right, so that's a perfect lead-in to Karen Johnson, who's the Executive Vice President, Brand Street Properties, owner of Evergreen Walk. I'm sorry.
That's okay. You want to go to Kim and stay on the left, or go to me?
Nope, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
Here, I'll turn this up. Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Deputy Mayor, and Town Manager. This is the first time I've been invited to this type of a forum. I'm normally on the other side of the table, and so this is really a treat to see the proactive approach that this community is taking, and it's of no surprise. So, Karen Johnson, I'm with Brand Street Properties. In addition to working for a development company, I am a planner, and so I have sometimes a unique perspective on what it is that I do and how it's perceived by communities. So a little bit about our company. We now are the new and very happy owners of Evergreen Walk. We've managed the property and coordinated all the redevelopment activities for the last 5 years. We also own Blueback Square, so we have a unique perspective within the Metro Hartford region. Even though I now live outside of Boston and work for a company based in Greenwich, I am from Eastern Connecticut. And so it's really been a treat for me to have an opportunity to work on Evergreen Walk and work in a community like South Windsor. So two-time Husky grad, so I was waiting for that. We're so pleased to have 2 teams in the Final Four. It's very exciting, and there's so many things to celebrate about this part of the state. I'm a bit biased for Eastern Connecticut, and so everything that we have done collectively add to that my own sort of personal commitment to this region. So thank you again, Mr. Mayor.
Nope, thank you. Now we'll have Kim Bishop from Capital Region Council of Governments.
Good evening. Again, my name is Kim Bishop. I am the There we go. I typically don't need a microphone. I'm a mom. I'm pretty loud. Kim Bishop, Economic Development Coordinator for CROG. CROG is Capital Region Council of Governments. So we are a voluntary coalition of the 38 municipalities in Hartford County if we had actual county government. We do everything from transportation, planning, and now to economic development. So my role is relatively new for our organization. We are the hosts of the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, the CEDS, a fancy document that gets worked on and stuck on a shelf. And then a couple years later, we say, oh, it's time to do it again. So all of the great folks, some of who are sitting around this table right now, who planned the CEDS document last time around said, you know, it would be really great if we could have someone in a role that could oversee this and really support the economic development efforts of our towns. So that's how my role came to be. Before I was with CROG, I actually spent quite a few years in talent attraction and retention. So what keeps people, specifically younger people, in their towns and finding their sense of place. So thank you so much for having me.
All right. And we have Jay Williams, President and CEO of Hartford Gives Foundation.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, to the Deputy Mayor and Town Manager. My name is Jay Williams. I'm the President and CEO of the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation, formerly known for the past 100 years as the Hartford Foundation for Public Giving. We are a community foundation that serves 29 towns in central Connecticut, of which South Windsor is one of them. We are the largest community foundation in the state of Connecticut, one of the largest and oldest in the United States. And while we have not traditionally been involved in economic development, that has been an area that we have moved toward over the past 7 or 9 years, coinciding with my arrival here. Was one of the things that attracted me here to this position, because prior to coming here 9 years ago, I served as the U.S. Assistant Secretary of Commerce at the Economic Development Administration. So I headed up EDA, the federal agency that is charged with leading the economic agenda for the entire country, which my portfolio included all 50 states, all the U.S. territories, but specifically both urban and rural areas. So the CEDS document that Kim referenced is a requirement to receive federal economic development funding. Prior to that, I served as the mayor of Youngstown, Ohio, so feel very comfortable sitting here. It's kind of a flashback coming back to the council chambers, but Youngstown, Ohio is a city in northeast Ohio, manufacturing town that underwent significant economic disruption back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and took 30 plus years to recover from that. But a big part of that recovery was engaging in innovative and very aggressive economic development strategies. So I've seen this from both the public side, being a mayor, being a resident first, being a mayor, and now excited about the opportunity to use philanthropic flexibility and resources to partner with folks who are here on the dais, and more importantly, the communities that we serve. So happy to be here.
Thank you very much. And last but not least, we have the President of the Chamber of Commerce here in South Windsor, Liliana Serrano Rojas.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the invite. It's such an honor to share the panel with all these high qualified professionals. As the mayor said, my name is Liliana Serrano, and I am the president of the board of the South Windsor Chamber of Commerce. This is my second term. I have been member of the board for the last 8 years. I'm a marketing specialist. I have a marketing company, and I can say that I moved to South Windsor 10 years ago, and I went through the process of opening a business, grow a business, and stay in business in town myself for the last 10 years without knowing nobody when I moved here. And yeah, I'm here to let you know how the Chamber can help and support business to grow and thrive.
Thank you very much. So, I know we've had a number of extremely qualified people in this chamber at the same time, but I'm just not sure, looking to my right and left, I'm not sure we've ever had this kind of expertise, all here at once. So hopefully everybody will take advantage of this. I'm going to tee up some questions, but we're hoping we get as many or more from the public. And if we don't get to them all today, we will try real hard to get people answers. So hopefully everybody will feel good about the process. So the first panel we put together was Advanced CT, Metro Hartford Alliance, and CROG. And kind of to set the stage, we'll begin with a regional perspective on business growth and competitiveness. Can the three of you comment on what economic trends are shaping business growth in our region right now? And I don't know if anybody wants to take a shot.
So happy to start. You know, we're at a really interesting point. We're gaining a lot of momentum in our key sectors, insurance, financial services, but also healthcare and advanced manufacturing. What we're finding right now is that our single biggest economic limiter is housing. We have literally companies that are trying to hire people to come here and fill positions from entry level all the way up to very senior executive levels that cannot find a place to live in our region. So housing for us right now is one of our biggest limiters to our economic growth. For every person we add more GDP to our region. I would say that maybe not so much for South Windsor, but hospitality is also a huge opportunity for us. We've got tremendous investment that's taking place by our hospitals, but what we lack is the appropriate hospitality to go along not only with those hospitals, but also with our convention center. We've got a convention center that was built nearly 20 years ago, still state of the art, built to be able to serve about 4,000 to 5,000 hotel rooms. Right now in downtown Hartford, there's about, the official number is around 1,100, but I could tell you the real number is closer to around 900. You know, you would actually stay in. There's about 900 rooms. So we are way underserved in the number of hotel rooms that we have. So the idea of having feet on the street, a vibrant downtown, I for one, I don't care if they're from you know, South Windsor or South London or Omaha, right? Just bring me the people, get them in our cities, have them in our restaurants, have them in our hotels, have them spending their money, and even better if they're on an expense account, because then they're not worried about it. So we have opportunities right in front of us regionally that I think could truly transform our communities into what we want them to be.
Yeah, I'll add to that. From my perspective, commercial real estate and the functional obsolescence of old properties tends to be a really big challenge for us. When I'm having conversations with companies, their interest is there, especially for companies that have no familiarity with Connecticut. They might know the sort of brand name counterparts of the Bostons in New York, but we have a really rich history of manufacturing. And so Connecticut is going through somewhat of a evolution of what we've been historically to the country in terms of our defense ecosystem and aerospace, whereas there was a time when we were prototyping, designing, manufacturing, and distributing from here. And now there's a little bit more parity in the nation, whereas we're still prototyping and we're still developing, but it may not make sense for us to distribute and assemble here. And so growth for us is really about how do we modernize our current commercial real estate stock so that it is attractive to the needs of the modern day manufacturer. And that looks different in each case, but it ultimately 100% will involve advanced robotics and an evolution in technology. And so the modern box of every request for information that I receive is asking for at least 20 feet of ceiling clear height. And there was a time when we were able to be really productive with 13 feet. And so we have a stock similar to David's comments about residential housing stock. We have similar limitations when it comes to commercial real estate. And as this conversation is trending towards incentives, what can you do to encourage the modernization of commercial real estate? That's a really important conversation to have at the town level, because it isn't always just one carrot. There has to be a holistic view about what you are looking to encourage from a particular asset. And so Connecticut has challenges with energy, so there can be conversations about incentivizing battery storage capabilities to help offset the cost during times when there's a heavy load on energy. So from my perspective, commercial real estate obsolescence is a pretty significant issue.
Thank you.
I'll just hop in and say another challenge that I'm sure comes as no surprise to everyone for our region is commercial office vacancies. And with them, also a lot of opportunity for redevelopment and for taking a look at what could be better served with these spaces. There are a lot of challenges that come with that, but that is something on the CROG side of things that we are tracking and we are working towards. I will also say that is not a Hartford region problem. That is not even a Connecticut problem. That is a national problem. And, you know, hearing the mayor talk a little bit about kind of being at an impasse for what the future of your town looks like, that's also something that, you know, at CROG we are hearing from a lot of your counterparts, from a lot of the other municipalities in the region. You know, how do we kind of marry who we were with where we want to go so that we can, you know, keep all of the things that make our towns great, but not kind of get left behind as, you know, surrounding towns and surrounding regions and states address some of these challenges.
All right. The next question to the panel, it could be all three, or if any one particular person. How does South Windsor compare to neighboring communities when businesses evaluate where to locate or expand, you know, based on your information?
Yeah, I can lead this off. The question is, or the answer for me is I don't know, because the company itself is looking to solve a particular challenge, and South Windsor is small enough to where you're not really competing with neighboring towns. They're looking at the region that it's currently sitting in, how it's performing for them, and then what are the cost-efficient alternatives that might be outside the state. So the challenge that we tend to get wrapped up in, because of, I think, structurally how Connecticut is built on a municipality than a state-level system, puts us in a bind where municipalities try to cannibalize themselves and try to fight with the contiguous town. And from my standpoint, as I'm having conversations with companies, and oftentimes these are companies that aren't necessarily even in the US yet. So for them, they're looking at the region as a whole. Where do I want my kids to go to school? How can my business be productive? Does this environment look like home for me? And so I would say I don't necessarily have a good answer for how South Windsor competes with its neighboring towns. I would say South Windsor is part of a larger ecosystem that benefits from its neighbors and vice versa.
So I'd like to come at this from a little bit of experience, having had the opportunity to work with the town of South Windsor for the Home Market Foods location here. To me, from my perspective, at the local level, you have two incentives that you have complete control over, and it's speed and predictability. Right? I don't know if Einstein ever proved that time equals money, but time does. In business, time equals money. So your ability to do what you said you're going to do and the time that you said you would do it is golden. And I could tell you on the project that we worked with the town, you guys were amazing. You told them what you were going to do, you told them when you were going to do it, and it was done in a day. It took literally like one conversation with the town of South Windsor to get what this company needed, direct answers on their direct questions. To Aaron's point, we get these requests for information from site selectors from all over the country, all over the world. And we are competing, often regionally, against other regions. So we have to stack our region up to other regions around the country just to be considered. And the process of site selection is not one of inclusion, it's one of exclusion. They're trying to get to one site. So any reason they can find to eliminate you, they'll eliminate you. So the two things that you can do, you're doing extremely well. I would go further and say that as we deal with these site selectors and businesses, there are things that they rate a town, a city, a region on. And oftentimes, those two lists don't match. You think they would. You would think that what a site selector is looking for is what the company is looking for. But there's one piece in particular that stands out, that companies care about, that site selectors don't, and that's quality of life. Your ability as a town to provide great schools, good shopping, right? Streets that are navigable, and a housing market, great schools, right? This is what companies are looking for. So when we're talking to site selectors, there's a fundamental mismatch between what we know their client is looking for and what they're grading us on. So we need to get to the companies. As soon as we have that conversation with a company and we get to actually put our region in front of a company, we start to win based on the work that you all are doing to make South Windsor an awesome place to live, work, I hate to say it, play, because it's so overused, but there it is, right? But the work that you're doing matters, and it matters to the employers, not so much to site selectors, but to the employers.
Just echoing David's point, South Windsor is no stranger to CROG. And I think that's a really, really great thing. It says that you take advantage of what CROG has to offer. And I might be a little biased, but I think we offer a lot. So again, whether it's transportation, planning, whether it's public safety, whether it's complete streets, bike trails, other planning and development services, support on zoning, support on housing. South Windsor definitely leans in to the organizations that can support this work. And I will also say the surrounding towns do as well, and that's a good thing. You can have a fantastic place surrounded by not so, great places. It's gonna, draw attention away. But the communities around South Windsor are also very vibrant and also no strangers to CROG, and also and generally easy to work with. And that overall, I think, is really, really good and bodes really well for South Windsor.
No, thank you. Just kind of a different question that we hear often. I'm not sure exactly how familiar you are with like the streets, but if I told you that on Sullivan Avenue, which is just down the road from here, we have a business, let's say that it's out of business and there's a building available and everybody knows it, and then let's say on Buckland Road that you might have come down off the highway, we have like new development going on, and sometimes the residents don't understand why somebody would want to build something on open land, take up open land when there's like a building available. So can you talk a little bit, I know we have people here from Evergreen Walk, but can you talk a little bit about location being important for a particular kind of business?
Happy to. So, again, back to speed and predictability. When you're dealing, as Aaron mentioned, like ceiling heights, are they the right size? Are they the right configuration? Sometimes for a lot of companies, it's just faster and more predictable to build exactly what they need than to try to retrofit an older building. That doesn't mean that it's not worth the effort, but if we're trying to attract a company That's what they care about, speed and predictability. If we've got a local company that cares about that site, then they are more willing to suffer the pains that will come with that redevelopment because they know what it's doing for their community. So yeah, I would go a little bit further. Aaron mentioned it. Knowing what you want, right? What do you as a community want on that site? If it's on Buckland or Sullivan, what is it that you want to see go there? And how can you, through planning and zoning and permitting, make those things easier, faster, more predictable for redevelopment or for new development?
Yeah, and I'll add, from the outside looking in, everyone's trying to de-risk the investment, right? No one wants to, especially if you're not familiar with the community that you're looking at, and the consultants that you've hired are looking at your community and this particular property amongst and up against, properties B and C. So one of the things that always comes to mind is a greenfield is going to be quote unquote cleaner than a gray field or brown field. And so de-risking an option for a company is going to be extremely important for one that's not currently in the community. And as David said, the ones that you have already, they may have gotten a good deal, but for companies that are evaluating an investment, these are decisions that people will lose their jobs or make careers on. Allocating millions of dollars towards a project, they need to be able to articulate that they have done the due diligence and that the project can be initiated, executed, and finished within a certain time frame. And a community needs to do everything that it can to de-risk any type of asset that they believe is an asset for a business.
I would also just say along those lines, new builds hopefully have a sense of resiliency built into them, right? We're looking a lot at, resiliency in our infrastructure. And, with a, redevelopment, if you're going to build in that resiliency, that is very costly.
Sorry, I just want to jump in one more time.
Okay, yep.
We mentioned speed, predictability, greenfield versus existing. Just to jump back to home market foods, we typically don't talk about who the competition is, but in that particular instance, we were competing against a greenfield site in Texas. Right now, I think the knee-jerk reaction is, how could we win against Texas? We did because of speed and predictability. That company was able to get their production going faster here because you had a very unique building, right? And we leveraged that to the company. They could have gone to Texas and built their own, but it would have put them 18 months behind where Connecticut was, right? So understanding what assets you have and who wants them, like if you've got a unique building or something that makes a particular site unique, like there is, I guarantee you, there is somebody out there that will buy it, especially if you can make it quick and fast.
Okay. I'm going to do one more question with this group, and then we'll go on to the next panel. And this applies to a number of the people here, but what role do you think incentives, including tax abatements or any other kind of incentives, play in site selection decisions?
Y'all are going to get tired of me. Tax incentives in general are the icing on the cake. They're never the cake. It's the icing on the cake. Sometimes it's table stakes. Like you've got to have something so that you can participate in the risk with that company. Companies want to feel that their community, wherever they go, is holding hands with them. And the way you hold hands is you participate in the risk by giving up something. But incentives will never make a bad deal good, right? So understanding just the fundamentals of why you are going to incentivize a project to happen in your community, again, it comes back to what do you want, right? As a community, what is it that you want to put your dollars into? Who do you want to hold hands with, right? And for me, that's how I look at incentives. We got to be in the game. Even on incentives, they got to be predictable, right? Oftentimes, when by the time Aaron gets the call, the site selector's already been on the state's website. They've already looked at incentives. They've already looked at all those things. We get eliminated so many times before we're even in the match. We don't even know that we are in a competition, and we're already eliminated because we don't have statutory incentives. There's nothing that a site selector can look at us and say, all right, I think we would qualify for this one, and that one, right? I'm going to call Aaron and see what he says, right? Predictability, right? Something that we could go out into the marketplace and say, if you come to Connecticut, here's an array of incentives that you might be eligible for. Right? There are some things on the incentive side that we could do at the state level that would get us in the game that we're not currently in.
Yeah, I'll add that incentives need to be very thoughtful and customized to what you're trying to achieve. All right, so a lot of people throw out incentives as if it's a bad thing. It's a bad thing if you're leading with incentives, and that's the answer for everything. And also, there's a misconception that incentives are always money, always dollars out of the pocket and into somebody else's. Incentives take on a variety of different characteristics. You can incentivize landlords and building owners to not tear down certain infrastructure in a property, because even if a company moved out, the infrastructure inside might be worthwhile to the next tenant. And so their incentive could be, well, we'll pay for any type of carrying costs up until you get another tenant in there, so we can keep it somewhat fluid, right? Versus the tenant having to be either turned off by how much tenant improvements they would have to make into a building, if otherwise, if a landlord didn't kind of strip it out and just kind of turn it into a box. I'd also add that with incentives, companies have a business case that is way beyond the incentives. There's a reason that they are locked in on a community, and that usually has to do with, as the panelist said, it has to do with the schools. It has to do not only with how productive the company can be during business hours, 9 to 5, but what is the experience from 5 to 9 for their family. And so that's an incentive, that's a draw. Also, how lucrative and how plush is the ecosystem for talent, right? There's something that's drawing a company to a place, and there's something that's keeping a company in a place. And incentives sometimes companies need more incentives than others, but it's gonna be different for each company. And it's important for any community to understand each project, what's driving the project, and if there are gaps that would prevent a company from either moving into your community, or if there's a gap that's preventing or pushing them out, those are the things that communities need to understand.
Thank you. All right, the second panel is private sector investment, which is Evergreen Walk and the South Windsor Chamber of Commerce. Can you both explain how town staff support and/or financial incentives influences site selection and development decisions?
So our focus is primarily, obviously, retail, service-related businesses, and restaurants. However, I think most of the key points that the three earlier speakers made during their panel discussion is universal. So what we experienced in South Windsor, and I'll give you the short version because we've been out here for 5 years doing all of this. Specifically, how does a community like South Windsor make a difference in what we can attract as landlords? So our experience with Whole Foods, as many of you are probably aware, something that we were able to bring to South Windsor, frankly, the first Whole Foods in Eastern Connecticut, which I live about 45 minutes from here, so I'm super excited about that. The difference is the timing. Everyone has said the timing and the certainty of the process. And Mr. Mayor, in the beginning, you described an easy process. I don't think that South Windsor is an easy process because your staff, your Planning and Zoning Commission, Inland Wetlands have gone through an incredibly thoughtful process to have fair and balanced regulations. And that's not an easy feat because you are constantly trying to find that sweet spot to how much do we regulate to get what we want without turning away investment. And that's really the critical point. And your staff, and I wish Michelle was here, but she already knows that I have a tremendous amount of respect for her professionalism. What you were able to accomplish in this community has made our lives easier and allowed us to do everything that we've done at Evergreen Walk over the last 5 years. So I'll give you just a more specific example, if you don't mind, because I think the topic of incentives, tax abatements, is not really something that we get involved with. It's more of the industrial other users. No one wants to incentivize retail and restaurant because one of the problems is there's a perception there's always too much of it. And so the issue of redevelopment, cost to go into things, modifying simple tenancies, retail tenancies, very, very expensive. You all pointed out all of these critical points. So the question is, how do you help that process go forward? So we first got involved in summer of 2020 with Evergreen Walk, and obviously we all know what was happening in summer of 2020. We want to forget about it, but it was an extremely difficult time. We knew that Whole Foods was in the market and looking for the right location. And so we were able to, with some very early preliminary conversations, get a lease executed with them in December. And we were able to do that by providing all of the upfront information. Before that lease was executed, we spent 4 or 5 months in planning, confidential planning. From December of 2020 to the end of the year in 2021, we had gone through a text amendment that we needed to do to locate a grocery store. We received a general plan of development approval, which is something that's required in Evergreen Walk. It's a master plan community. We received Inland Wetlands Commission approval. We had a couple of different meetings with economic development. We needed site plan approval, obviously. And so, you know, those are 5 or so really important things. And we did that in less than a year, to the point where we had a high enough confidence level to go to construction documents so that we could start, and we received our building permit approval then in the beginning of January of 2020. So fast forward, we had a tremendous amount of infrastructure work to do because what was out there, even though there was a former Highland Park market, wasn't suitable. We had to relocate tenants, we had to demolish buildings, we had to get building permits for the relocation of the tenants. All of these things were essential in bringing that significant anchor tenant to Evergreen Walk and changing the vacancy rate at Evergreen Walk from what it was today to what it is today. So I won't give you the percentages. I think if you just walk around, anyone that's a resident of this community, I hope you're there and you see the difference in that short period of time. So yes, it's about what we were able to put on the table with Whole Foods, but it's about how we were able to deliver and implement. And so the certainty in the process, the speed of the process, and I'll say that without also cautioning that there was never a moment where there was not full transparency in the process, and there was never a moment when there was not an opportunity for public input. I've been in this town hall so many times, I can't even count, public hearings, online public hearings that we were still holding during that time frame. But full transparency and accountability and speed, those are things that don't necessarily happen in local government. And so how did South Windsor do it? Years and years and years of great government. And it's remarkable because there's probably only a handful of communities that I know of in the state that have found this nice balance where, yes, they want development. I can tell you a number of communities that have great professional development, professional staff, they don't want development. And they're very clear about that. I think we all know who those communities are. Most of them are in Fairfield County. So in this core area in central Connecticut, historically, West Hartford, for years and years, and I don't want to date myself, but I've been working as a planner, a developer in Connecticut for almost 40 years, so long time. I've seen it all. I've worked in almost every community. Glastonbury and West Hartford used to be held up as like the best. South Windsor is right there. And so you have done this with a very long and deliberate and thoughtful process. And so that allows us to come in and do what we like to do, which is completely redevelop a community. This community of Evergreen Walk is, we just, 2024, I think we celebrated 20 years. It needed to evolve. And it was an amazing concept 20 years ago, but it was dying and it needed to change. And the key to that was bringing in a strong anchor tenant that other tenants wanted to be around. And so that certainty of the process, that efficiency is what made the difference.
Thank you.
Sure.
So, as you know, the chamber mission is a little bit different because what we are here for is to support our members. And I have to say that our experience with the town has been nothing but wonderful. I do want to piggyback a little bit with what my colleague said. And I think part of why South Windsor is so interesting for a business to start is the balance you have between incentives and taxpayer responsibility. And also that South Windsor is a town that is not only sustainable but predictable. So people know if you're opening a business here, you get that business secure, right? The economy it's secure. And for our members, it has like all day, when we mediate between the member and the town, the relationship that we had built with the town and all the different areas, I have to say that it's absolutely amazing. They are very well prepared, they are very responsive, they are always willing to help. If it is for educational purposes, if it is connecting, supporting business in paperwork. So yeah, I think we try to support our business community on the best we can, and at the same time keep the relationship with the town while protecting what our members are looking for at the same time.
So I know the, excuse me, the first panel covered it a little bit, but from your viewpoints, is there anything else that hasn't been discussed that makes a certain community attractive?
I think the panel covered it, earlier panel covered it very well. I think the challenge for any community, and this is something that I've, again, as a planner, have dealt with for many, many years, it's a constant struggle of how much do you want to allow? And cannibalization is a great term for people that may not understand it. It's that, well, how many tenants are we potentially going to lose with the new project that's going in across Buckland? And that's a very real concern that we have. And why is that? Because if a tenant, for example, wants to expand, maybe it's too expensive for them to look at going into an adjoining space in our project. More likely, it could be that they get much better visibility on Buckland Road. The driving force around Evergreen Walk, Master Association, Evergreen Walk shops 20 years ago was nobody wanted to see it from the road. And if you're a retailer, that just doesn't work. And we've struggled with signage. We have struggled with that visibility. Obviously, we're in a little bit of a depression and you can't see it. We struggled with getting monument signage. And so it's tough. It's really difficult. How do you, I don't want to use the term protect. How do you sustain what you have and balance out future economic development? And it is a constant challenge.
I have to say that I fully agree with that, because one of the biggest concerns when business owners come is to keep that balance, how the town is going to keep the balance between bringing more big development and to cover that taxpayers' balance. And I think that is somehow the jewel of this town, right? So avoiding the cannibalism will be.
That's great, thank you.
I think if I could just add
Go
one
ahead.
other point to that, I am sensitive to the need for maintaining the grand list. And I think it's also important to realize that backfilling those spaces, helping landlords prevent the functional obsolescence. And you can't always do that. We couldn't do it with the former Old Navy location and the former Highland Park Market location. We had to completely demolish those buildings at a significant cost. And the infrastructure wasn't right. We had to relocate all of the utilities and then build a new roadway to support what we were doing at tremendous cost. And so in some cases, you have to say, and this of course was a great example of it, this is the right location for the right use. And so in order to get them in there, you have to make the investment and spend the money. And it doesn't always pencil out, as you, I'm sure, all know very well. And yet you have to think about that up and down of the grand list, because when you take those properties, and I'm sure most people understand this, commercial properties are assessed typically based on an income approach. So when there's no tenant in the space, all of a sudden their tax obligation goes practically to nothing. And so for income producing properties, you want to make sure that they can sustain that life long term. And so sometimes those conversations with landlords need to happen before they reach that point of no return.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're going to go to panel 3, and I think we're doing a pretty good job time-wise. So this one is Community Impact and Partnership with the Hartford Gives Foundation. So can you please talk about how towns can align economic development with their community values and why that's important?
Sure. Traditionally, philanthropy is not often thought of or associated with economic development, and it's could be short-sighted. And I appreciate what you were saying, because one of the notes that I took early on was when the mayor, you were talking about the community values, and that is something that is keenly aligned with we as a philanthropic organization, how we would play a role in economic development. And it's not to be upfront. So if you sort of think of your favorite group, right? There's the singer that's out front, there's the drummer, there's the guitarist, but often somewhere there's the background singers. You don't always see them. They're not always the stars, but when they're not there, that performance isn't as gratifying, and that performance isn't as filling. So I think philanthropy being sought or thought of as a role as a background singer is how we can position ourselves to help that community assert its values. A couple of different roles. Think of the role of philanthropy. We would be interested in lowering the barrier to entry. And when I say that, how can those businesses that aren't Whole Foods, that aren't Home Foods, that are the businesses that are perhaps the family-owned businesses that have been in the community for a very long time, the businesses owned by entrepreneurs who reflect the diversity of the community, who oftentimes have difficult accessing capital. So we want to figure out how we might be lowering the barrier of entry to some of these organizations and businesses to take advantage of some of the economic development opportunities that exist. In this country, it is still a fact that the vast majority of the economic activity is generated by small businesses. We hear of the titans and the trillion-dollar and multi-billion-dollar business valuations and those businesses that are traded on Wall Street, but the vast majority of job creation and economic activity comes from small businesses. We also, Aaron talked about the risk, de-risking a transaction. We think that philanthropy, we have the ability to be a de-risking partner, right? Providing an alternative return on investment. Return on investment is often measured in very quantifiable ways, which is appropriate for economic development, but we can bring resources that don't have to be measured in the traditional ways that economic development transactions measure return on investment. We can put resources into a transaction that don't have to be, have an internal rate of return that is, competitive on the market. We don't necessarily think that we have to have our resources returned in a way that, typically you think about when you think about economic development. So we also we are very aligned with the community that wants to have an inclusive approach to its economic development. Again, these aren't always deals that are as sophisticated. They don't necessarily require site selectors. For those deals, that's fine, but I think our role in helping that community to maintain the character, maintain those values that very much, we've heard this, look to retain. So when I was mayor of Youngstown, Ohio, our economic development approach was in this order: retention, expansion, and attraction, right? We wanted to retain those businesses that were there, and the job creation that we saw came more from the businesses that were there that we retained expanding. That was always an easier thing to help that business expand. And yes, it was sexy to attract the new businesses, and we wanted to do that, but we knew that being a community much like South Windsor, we were positioned between two larger cities, Pittsburgh and Cleveland, so we couldn't play the, hey, look at us, when there are two much larger cities to our east and to our west. But what we were able to do was have what David talked about was predictability and speed, that we had a set of economic incentives that you could go to our website and see that if you were engaging or contemplating coming to this community, these were the things that you could be eligible for. And when we then partnered with our philanthropic partners, it gave us an additional degree of creativity and flexibility, right? If a deal could be done without philanthropic involvement, that was great. And we didn't position ourselves to try to be there on every deal. But for those deals that said, you know what, we've put all the tools on the table, we're very close, but there's just something in a capital stack that just needs to be tweaked, or there's some additional tool that needs to be brought to bear, that's where philanthropy can play a role. And I think that's what has been so exciting about moving into this area with the Greater Hartford Gives Foundation a number of years ago, that there are 29 towns that we serve. In each of those towns, we are open to having a conversation with, not to be, again, your lead economic development entity. You've got massive expertise here. But to be the entity that we can at least have a conversation if that transaction is viable but just needs an additional perspective or a tool, that's a conversation we could welcome. And I'll end by saying it really are the smaller deals are the ones that we, the deals that are important to people who are sitting in this audience. The folks that you know that might be that next generation, maybe that child is ready to take over the family business, but it just isn't large enough to do a deal that might meet some of the tools. We want to be a partner that, can really help those transactions. So again, it's a background role. We're fine with that. When it comes to nonprofits and philanthropy, we very much are front and center stage, but when it comes to economic development, we really want to position ourselves as that additional resource or phone call that any of you can make. It doesn't mean the deal will be done, but we want to be that phone call that says, hey, this might be the difference of whether or not this transaction can happen. And oftentimes, again, it's these small family businesses that really are the bread and butter that reflect the character of the communities that we serve.
So knowing, kind of what you know about our community and communities like us, do you have an example of something that you might have already done, like in a neighboring community, that might be helpful to us to kind of have some perspective?
Absolutely. So again, we serve 29 communities, but the example that comes to mind happened in Hartford. It happened, ironically, during COVID, where the small business, there was lots of ARPA money, and that was all well and good. But there was a gap trying to get those grants to the small neighborhood businesses, right? We were no longer able to, at the same rate that we were going to the large big box stores, and people didn't necessarily have transportation. There was a lot of nervousness behind that. So the small neighborhood stores, all of a sudden, that you could walk to, that you could go in, and not have to concern yourself with all the things that were, we were concerned with walking into the stores and all the restrictions. Those businesses were suffering because they weren't necessarily large enough or sophisticated to have the staff or the time to tap into the federal programs or even state programs. But in this instance, the city of Hartford said, listen, we've got a program that we want to provide. At that point, it was $10,000 to $15,000 or $20,000 grants to these businesses to do the things they needed to do to get the PPE and to sort of set themselves up to make sure they had the supply and the inventories. But they didn't have the time or the ability to tap into the federal program. So we partnered with the city of Hartford, provided, I think the first time around was about $500,000 that ultimately went directly to those small businesses. So they could, with perhaps a one-page application, very straightforward, have very quick access to up to $20,000 to do the things that they needed to do, which then meant those neighbors and residents could patronize those businesses. It kept the businesses financially afloat. It kept residents with the ability to get what they needed in their neighborhood and not have to get into their car or get onto the bus and try to figure out how to get to the big box store and all those restrictions. So that was just one example that really resonated because of the financial impact that it then had to keep that money circulating into the neighborhoods, and not just the city of Hartford, but specific neighborhoods was an example. And I think that ability to put that program together in just a matter of weeks when timing was critical was one example of how philanthropy provided that flexibility.
It's perfect. Deputy Mayor Paterno, I'm not going to go yet. I'm just going to ask you, how many questions do we have?
6 questions.
6 questions. Do you think we go town manager, or do we go to questions before we? Why don't you give us a couple?
Okay. This one is from Joe Kennedy, and he's asking what's the impact of high inflation, high interest rates, and higher food prices on our economic development plans?
So I'll tell you that it is crushing projections for budgets for new product, to build new commercial real estate.
Yeah.
I'm working on a pretty significant project that will likely go public next month, but that project almost was not feasible because the price of materials to build the project. The gap between building the project and even if in the perfect of scenarios, no public entity would have been able to fill in the gap. The numbers they weren't good for anybody. And so the price of materials since last year have really been a barrier to entry because there's no product on the market that can fill the gap as wide as it's become for especially new construction.
All right.
I would throw in that tariffs don't necessarily help when it comes to bringing new business that has a global marketplace. Again, the predictability. When we had a company that was going to service the Americas by locating here so that they could service Canada and Mexico, and when that went away, the project went away. So there are so many decisions, little decisions that can kill a project. I mentioned earlier, it's a matter of elimination, right? What will eliminate a location, and sometimes it's completely out of our control.
All right, so Deputy Mayor Paterno, why don't we do one more, and then we'll go to the town manager, talk about South Windsor, and then we'll come back to questions.
Okay, thank you. This is from Janice Snyder. First one is three-part question. Why does it seem so difficult to redevelop currently vacant buildings?
Mike, why don't you give it a shot and then we'll.
Oh, please.
So, you know, I think if you look, there's probably 2, maybe 3 locations that when people talk about redeveloping currently vacant buildings, they're talking about. And if you look at those locations, the big challenges with them is the desire by the individual that owns those buildings to actually do that redevelopment work. The town, myself, councils, staff, are consistently meeting with those individuals to try to promote that work and get them interested in doing it. But at the end of the day, we can only show them the road, we can't make them walk down it. In some instances, there's actually reasons why they're not moving forward with the redevelopment of certain places. Maybe it's a contamination issue. And in one instance I'm even thinking of, it actually is a financial benefit to their company, big picture, to actually not redevelop it because it's making money on a different idea of having it as a not best used property. So, you know, there's multiple reasons as to why certain things are not getting done or redeveloped, but we certainly are trying to push them little by little. You know, I was very pleased to see some changes to the Transfer Act that are going on with the state. Hopefully as those things get put in place, that'll help with some of the redevelopment of some of those properties as well.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, another one. If you could predict one major business type you would like to see in South Windsor or the Metro Hartford area, what would it be?
You're still, you're light. Okay.
So, it's a fun question, isn't it? So I'm gonna go a little off topic on that. I'm gonna answer the question I want to answer.
Okay.
But it's in line.
We do that all the time here on the
Right,
council, so
it's
go
something
for it.
about this chair, I think. So we have been working to bring a daily direct nonstop flight between Hartford and London. And it's a decision that we're really close to hearing from. And we'll hear probably in the month of April. So, you know, we talk about a lot of things, but when I look at the long-term economic growth for our region, right, having our businesses have easier access to the markets that they need to serve is vital, right? We have our regional GDP, the amount of goods and services that we produce as a region is about $121 billion. We dwarf regions our size around the country. We do extremely well, and we do that because we're able to get our goods and services out to the markets. Getting our financial service sector, right, be it from insurance to financial services to London, the number one city that they're transacting business with will increase not only the business that our companies are able to do, but the number of businesses in the UK that will come to us to set up shop. So that flight to me, it's not exactly the business or the thing, but it represents long-term sustained growth for our region.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Paterno, I'm going to go to the town manager, and I'm trying to be respectful for people's time.
Yep.
So after he talks about South Windsor in general, we'll go back to questions, but we'll kind of get a feel for, you know, I'm sure with this panel and this audience, we could probably be here till 10 o'clock tonight. But let's, you know, I was hoping for 8:30 to 8:45, but let's go to the town manager to talk about South Windsor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, you know, as was requested, I put together a nice little slideshow here for us to talk a little bit about economic development with South Windsor. I'm sure, Karen, you recognize the background there, as that's your home. So, maybe this will work from here, maybe it won't. Oh, there we go. All right, so what is economic development in the big picture of things from our perspective here in South Windsor? So, of course, as we talk about it, everybody thinks about it as, you know, revenue generation and talking about the bottom line associated with our grand list and grand list growth and making sure we could kind of keep taxes down. But we also look at a couple other things. First of all, job creation. You know, we all would like to have jobs and be able to, you know, have good paying jobs that help us take care of our families and live in our homes and enjoy our communities. So we do look at it as job creation for our local community, but then also we do look at economic development as the enhancement of our quality of life. So when we do talk about local businesses and even potential new businesses, we talk about the quality of life and trying to enhance that and make that into, you know, something that's good for all of us. This is going to be slow. There we go. So how do we do economic development in our community? I mean, we're sitting here at a table with a bunch of people who are doing it on a professional level, and I think, you know, we talk a lot about economic development in South Windsor, but we don't really talk about, you know, how we actually do it. And a lot of it is through relationships and spending time talking to people, beating the streets, meeting with Economic Development Commission, meeting with local developers and businesses, you know, talking about possible new opportunities and being available for them when they do come in. Additionally, we really pride ourselves on our relationships that we have with our local utilities. You know, as David mentioned with Home Market Foods, we were able to make a lot of things happen really fast. One of the issues associated with that was their electric, and making sure that their electric utilities to that building met what they needed. And I sat on a meeting with them and Eversource where they were told by Eversource it was going to be 2 years till they could find out whether they would actually have the appropriate electricity to serve what they needed. At which point the town of South Windsor leveraged our relationships with Eversource and got that answer for them. I think it was within the week. And then lastly, with our other government entities, as you see, you know, Senator Saud is here. You know, we are always reaching out to our state partners as well as even on our federal level to work with them on making things work better for our local businesses. But then on the other side of that are incentives. And I think, you know, as it was said, it's kind of the icing on the cake. I like to look at it as kind of kicking projects over the finish line and the thing that kind of makes them happen. So it shows to a potential business or a new business, it shows to them that we have our community is supportive of it, that we're a partner in it, and that we want to help them with their financing and make that actually happen. And we're actually giving a little to get a lot. Maybe. I think you're gonna have to do it. I think the battery's either dead. Oh, there we go. So I just wanna, you know, I think unfortunately amongst a lot of people in South Windsor, tax abatements have become a little bit of a dirty word. And I just wanna look at it in terms of a little bit of a case study and an actual case study that has happened here in our community. So I think everybody has seen this building. This is the Mobis building. And it went through, it was at one point in 2012, it was vacant land. And it was generating the town of South Windsor $3,350.40 in taxes at that time. The town of South Windsor went and it entered into a tax abatement with that project to make that happen. And during the actual development, so the abatement doesn't actually go into place until the development is done. So during the development, while it was under construction, it generated $311,000 in new taxes for the town. It was given a 7-year abatement at 70%. That's basically the maximum of what the town of South Windsor will do. And then during that abatement, from 2016 to 2022, you could see it generated between $131,000 to $162,000 in new tax revenue. That's compared to $3,000 that it was generating as vacant land. Now that abatement ended in 2023, and the town of South Windsor is now realizing $243,740 in tax revenue. That's a business that probably would not have happened had there not been a tax abatement for it. Additionally, If you want to look at it from a business standpoint, I'm sure everybody talks about ROIs and return on their investment. It's a 4.5-year ROI on that. So I think it makes a lot of sense for the town to actually jump in and be a partner in it. And we have to give a little bit to get a lot back. I'm going to keep giving a little more to this remote. Maybe it'll move. Maybe.
Not happening.
It's dead. All right, I'm going to go over and I'll finish from the podium.
Anyone has some grant money for new technology, just let us know, okay?
So, big picture for tax abatements in the town of South Windsor, I think, everybody has talked about them, and, we have a long history of issuing tax abatements and using them to promote new businesses. I just want to talk about new revenue that's generated from those tax abatements. If you take a look at this chart, this is the new revenue that we're expecting 2027, we're looking at 138,000. 2028, we're looking at 412,000. So I think if you look at those pictures and you look back in history, those are projects that were layered in over time. If we're not willing to help people move their projects across the finish line, we're going to see that we're going to have years like 2027. Again, if you look historically, 2030, we didn't have a whole lot going on. Just in terms of general picture, this is just kind of the idea of what tax abatements are out there, just because I think everybody thinks there's millions and millions of them. This is all of them, just so everybody understands. You can see some of the companies that have received them, and total tax revenue for 2026 under the 2026 approved mill rate is $1,378,092 for the town. So let's just talk real quick about the economic development landscape and what it looks like here. There was a big change with the pandemic, as we've heard from some of our other friends in the room. And, retail business has kind of gone to the service industry business. Construction costs have changed significantly. Interest rates and financing are really challenging. I think we're starting to see, again, with the way the economy is right now, we're starting to see another slowdown. Our planner has actually told me for the first time in her career, she doesn't have a new project in front of her. We have a laundry list of projects that are approved through planning and zoning, ready to go, shovel ready, and none of them are actually under construction right now. We're going through a shift from new development in green sites. Those sites are almost all used up. There's a few here and there, but they're almost all gone, to looking at redevelopment. And redevelopment comes with new sets of issues and new challenges, but they're not things that we can't take on. Some of those issues are like brownfields and, the issues of the unknown, what's in that building there. And then fitting what that business model is into an existing location. For example, as we were talking about ceiling heights, the other issue that I've always run across is the span between beams, and how open is the floor plan. So, some of these buildings, while they sit there and they might be great, they don't always fit everybody's business model. So some of the things that we have on the horizon, I think even already we've got the Wheeler property. There's some movement in terms of our town center. We've got movement actually happening now on Deming and Buckland, and Tempo 2. We've termed it Tempo 2 apartments behind Evergreen Walk. Those are all sitting ready to go, and we're ready for them to happen. In terms of some industrial projects, we have Talbot Lane, Kennedy Road, Sullivan Avenue. Those are pretty much shovel ready to go. And then, the big one that everybody wants to see happen is the Mastech property. And that's sitting there. There's some challenges associated with that. The company that owns it is getting a lot of revenue off of the fuel cell behind it. and they're not really interested in putting a lot of money into that building and doing anything with it. So site selectors would be a great spot, just want to point that out. So that's kind of the picture of economic development for the town of South Windsor and the way we look at it and how we're working on it. Happy to answer any questions, and I'll take my seat.
Okay, Andy, can we, I know you were looking at the questions. Is there, if we can, Jen Snyder had two. Can we go to somebody else?
Yep. This one's from Stephen King Jr., one of our town council members. Can a town like South Windsor influence a business to hire the town's employees, the residents of the town, in lieu of, say, a tax abatement? So how do we incentivize that piece with the development?
I would say investing in the education system, making sure that the conversation with the company and their skills that they need are being taught locally in the school system. So the pipeline can be very seamless.
Yeah.
So what's happening and what's happened in the past is that businesses have they had sort of kicked the can in terms of engaging with education and workforce development programs about what skills they needed, what was coming down the pike. And so schools were kind of off on their own, teaching traditional skill sets, while businesses were solving different problems. And so the best way to incentivize a company to hire locally is to make sure that there's a relationship with the business locally and the education system, and try to customize a curriculum that way.
I would just also say, just really quick, thinking about space for your talent, right? Bringing it back to housing, making sure that your vibrant, fantastic town with a great sense of community and place, you know, and great sense of place, it's definitely a place that talent wants to live, but they need a place to live, right? They actually need the units available to live there. So a business will come here and be happy to hire residents if they can get that talent pool. So making sure that there's enough housing for that talent pool, and that all of the other work that you're doing on economic development is not just on that big business side, but again, on that smaller business side. What really makes South Windsor great? What creates that sense of belonging for all of you to stay here, and what will create that sense of belonging and that sense of place for future talent to be here as well?
In our case, we partner with the high school, and we continually give the high school different webinars about what businesses are looking, including a scholarship for kids that are on their path to business careers. And also we have a space that is called Launch and Learn, where business can tell a little bit more of what their business is about and what their needs is. And we put the postings, the job postings, and create that network for the community. So
I would just add the timing is important, right? Because if you're trying to answer that question when the business is already about to open and you're too late. So part of this is, while, you know, businesses, generally speaking, are going to say, if we've got a talent pool that has a basic set of skills, they'll do the rest. They'll put their proprietary training in. They're willing to make that investment. What they don't want to do is have to do sort of the basic remedial things. So I think part of what we did is we had in our development agreements incentives for businesses to hire city residents, but we had to make sure that there was always that pool with the basic skills that were there, that the businesses were then willing to add their own proprietary specific type of training.
Okay, so just from a timing standpoint, I think we're looking at maybe answer questions for like another 5 minutes, and then we'll close, and then anybody who can stay, and then we'll get answers to any of the questions that haven't been answered. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is from Paul Burnham from our Economic Development Commission. How do you convince site selectors that are in Hartford and the Hartford region to bring a company to this area? I think, Mr. Smith, that was, I think that was for you, site selectors. How do you get them to come to South Windsor, a company that you're working with?
If you don't mind, I'll jump in.
No, go ahead.
you know, I think it comes back to what is it that you want, what is it that you have. If we're talking about a brownfield site that's got a certain number of acreage, right? There's a certain subset of companies that would be interested in that. If it's a retail spot, again, there's a different subset. So understanding what it is that you want, and then who is it that's working with those companies? You know, I'm a firm believer in that there is always a buyer for what you have to sell. You just have to identify what it is about what you've got that will push that buyer over the edge. What makes it unique? What makes it different? Is it access to a population? Right? And there are things from the Metro Hartford Alliance side that we would love to be able to help you with in terms of data, in terms of understanding who is the customer, or what customer base lives around a spot. And I'll throw this out. We were trying to understand, we've got this product called Placer AI, and it allows us to understand crowd sizes and where crowds come from. So we just had fun one day and thought, well, let's take a look at a UConn women's basketball game, right? And where are people coming from? Meaning, what is it that people that went to that game, where were they before the game, right? Because that gives us some indication of what they like to do before a game. And turns out the number one location that people were coming from was the Texas Roadhouse, just up the street. Up the street. I don't know why, but that was it. So, you know, understanding who it is that you want and how can we use these tools to understand how to zero in for you on who that could be.
Yeah, it's really hard for a company to move. So when they're moving, they're not looking to move down the street. They're trying to solve for a particular challenge. And if they're gonna move, they're gonna widen that aperture very large. So I would say less more so about kind of trying to attract a company from down the street to South Windsor. Really look and have conversations with companies that are in South Windsor already and ask what are the challenges that they're experiencing and how do they foresee the roadmap to growth. So you can then begin to customize certain programs that would offset the costs for achieving that growth and will allow them the ability to expand, to create more opportunities. Because one of the sensitivities with attraction is making sure that you're not bringing in competition. Like a cluster is really good because that allows for competition and it builds an ecosystem that a broad audience from a macroeconomic perspective can observe and say, we need to be there because they've got all the talent, they're building this cluster. But that happens because a company is growing and has demonstrated that they can be successful here. And the ecosystem around them, they're utilizing to the best of their ability. And so I think it's really, really hard for a company to move down the street when they're gonna take on that type of challenge.
All right, and Deputy Mayor, do we have time for one more question?
One more. All right, from Carol Anderson. Are there thoughts still to turn South Windsor into a West Hartford type community? Where do things stand in reducing individual lot sizes? Should we remain at 7.7 or 7.5 or 0.75?
I guess I'm getting a lot of this one. I mean, I think, like I said earlier, South Windsor's got a lot of different charm. And there's charm in terms of the commercial sections of town, there's charm in terms of the rural sections in town, there's charm in terms of the industrial sections of town. You know, one of the nicest parts about South Windsor is we have a little bit of everything. And I can't tell you how many different times I've brought, whether it's a new business or a resident or somebody else, And, you know, we've gone out for lunch and, you know, they've experienced what Evergreen Walk has. We've gone for a drive down Main Street and they've seen the beauty that that brings to everything. And then they see all the industrial businesses in between. And people are just mind blown by how we do have a little bit of everything. And I think the challenge that we're faced with, and probably this is more of a question for planning and zoning, but at least from my perspective, the challenge that we're faced with as a community is how we balance that to make sure all of those are recognized and continued forward.
All right, so I'm going to turn to the deputy mayor who had something that he wanted to cover. And before I do that, I will just let everybody know this whole concept was his idea. While I really want to thank all the panel and town manager, town staff, Mrs. Sennett, the clerk of the council, who did a lot of the work. I really do want to thank the deputy mayor for the idea and a lot of the heavy lift.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two things I want to add. Tonight, this program was videotaped, and it will be available on the town website starting 24 hours, starting tomorrow. So if you have some friends who weren't able to attend tonight, please let them tune in through the GIS system on the town website. And secondly, I want to just mention the balance that we're trying to develop here. So the mayor mentioned we've got 2,400 acres that are preserved right now as either open space, farmland, preserved farmland, development rights, required open space in some housing developments where 30% of the land has to be given back to the town to remain as open space. So 2,400 acres. We're in the process, we just purchased another 20 acres right adjacent to Rice Street Park, which will increase the size of the park. And within the next 6 months, we're probably gonna have another roughly 220 acres preserved in the Main Street area of farmland. So this is not a full speed ahead development at all costs. We're trying to make sure there's a balance, and we're working to preserve farmland at the same time as we're saying economic development is important for this community. So I thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Mr. Maniscalco, anything as the town manager?
I would just like to follow up and just say thank you to everybody that came. Obviously, you know, just the fact that people show up and take the time to listen, write down their questions, I think shows that people care about their community and want to see good things. So from that perspective, I'd like to say thank you to everybody that showed up and everybody that watched. And I really appreciate everybody on the panel for coming out and participating tonight. Thank you.
And just a couple final words. We will get answers to any questions that you didn't get answered today. If anybody has some future questions, you can certainly contact the town manager or any of the counselors, and we'll work on getting answers. There will be another forum in a couple months on a totally different topic that we're beginning to work on. And again, I just want to thank everybody again for coming and making this so successful. Have a great night, everybody.